Todd Brommelkamp joins us today, Locked On Hawkeyes, as we take a look back at the win against Penn State, finding a way, and we dive in. Ferentz versus Fleck, two coaches that do it completely different ways.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent, Condon. That's Todd Brommelkamp, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We are your daily Iowa Hawkeye podcast. Todd and I have been covering together the Hawkeyes for over 50 years combined. We are getting old, but we got you covered here as we break things down. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Todd, good to see you once again. We're going to make some picks today presented by FanDuel. We're going to talk about that matchup, Ferentz versus Fleck, and two guys that certainly are wired differently, yet football programs that are very similar. And of course, we start today with our final look back at the matchup against Penn State. A great rivalry game. You know, it doesn't have a bronze pig on the line. It doesn't have any trophy. There isn't proximity. It's not like a lot of people work with a lot of Penn State fans or anything like that. But this is one of those organic rivalries that has certainly morphed throughout the years. And Kirk Ferentz, he gets the win against Penn State. It's a program he wanted to play for growing up. He's told you guys that many times in the past. We know the affinity growing up in Pittsburgh, what beating Penn State means. And, I had somebody in our comment section mention this, and I want to start with this thought. We saw emotional Kirk. We see emotional Kirk a lot, but you do wonder, kind of lingering in the back of mind, at minimum, Penn State's not in the schedule, I believe, for the next 2 years, but also I think their next trip is out there. This very well could be the last time, and maybe likely the last time that he's going to have an opportunity to play Penn State in Kinnick Stadium.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Trent, is when you view Kirk Ferentz getting emotional in a lot of those situations, you got to start thinking maybe this is the last time for some of those things, especially as you mentioned with the 18 teams in the Big Ten and not playing everybody on a yearly basis. And it's only gotten worse now. That ran through the back of my mind as well, that maybe this is the last time that we saw that, at least inside Kinnick Stadium. But you never know, Kirk, the way that he's going right now, he could coach another 10 years, and it probably wouldn't surprise anybody. But a good win. I think there were some good takeaways from it. Obviously, we'll probably talk a little bit about the field goal and how that backfired. But at the end of the day, I was watching the game with some friends. We were actually in Minnesota last weekend, this week's opponent. But we all kind of agreed that we felt better about that game with James Franklin as the head coach than with an interim coach. And so we were all relatively pleased to see Iowa come away with a victory at the end.
Another game where, like Indiana, give them interception early in the one. Now, this one wasn't nearly on Gronowski like the one was against the Hoosiers, but they get the interception off the deflected ball. Great play by that Penn State kid, one-handing that one. You're down 7-0. But then you mentioned the end of the first half situation. Iowa had all the momentum, and outside of one long drive in the second quarter, Iowa dominated long stretches of that football game. And you look at it, oh boy, can you steal 3 points out of this? And I'm sure that's the thought process there. Now, there's been a lot of talk about this and the kick before the kick, as it's blocked and ran back for a touchdown, that it was very short by Drew Stevens. A lot of people looked at that and said, well, you can't kick it in that situation. Now, being there, also, I had a few cocktails beforehand, so I could be a little bit off, but I looked at that and I saw right away, Drew Stevens, I thought, didn't give it his all. I mean, I've seen Drew Stevens when he really has to drive the ball, and that kick he made before the timeout did not look like Drew Stevens trying to knock that thing from, 67 yards. So I didn't have a problem with it, and I know a lot of people are using that as an example. I didn't think it was as big of a deal. Everydayers have heard me kind of lay that one out, but take us through your thoughts and thought process, and Kirk Ferentz being aggressive late in the half and blowing up in spectacular fashion.
Yeah, I think sometimes he has a tendency to swing wildly from one direction to the other. The big criticism with him has always been that he's so conservative. And then when he does think outside the box, things tend to sometimes backfire on him. And I've thought about this a lot over the last 4 or 5 days. The only reason that we're talking about this is because the worst possible scenario actually happened here. Anything else happens in that scenario, it's a footnote, and it really is at this point anyway. I liked how he took complete credit for it afterwards, said that it was his fault, it was his decision. It probably wasn't the smartest thing in the world there, and you did have to wonder, did that possibly change momentum going into the second half? And luckily for the Hawkeyes, it didn't really, but I did think it was an opportunity for Penn State to capitalize and maybe gain some momentum, and it certainly helped them remain and hang around in that game. There's no doubt about that.
I mean, the left side of the line just completely collapsed, and that was a reason for it on top of it. You do also wonder, could he go back even? Can he take an extra yard moving the ball back, and instead of a 7-yard snap, an 8-yard snap? Yeah, so you're adding another yard of distance there, but giving yourself a little time, it wouldn't have mattered because the way the left line just got absolutely demolished on that play. And then for the ball to not just get blocked, go backwards, pop right into the hands then of the special teams player for Penn State and go in for a touchdown. And I think also there was a little bit more vitriol because what happened? Penn State gets the ball coming out of the half, and it's 21-10, and you go from a game that you dominated for a long stretch to you're down 2 scores, and we know Iowa football down 2 scores, not exactly a position of strength, but they find a way. They found a way, a big reason because of Mark Gronowski's legs. He struggled mightily, mentioned the interception, 1 of 6 to start the game, finished 9 of his last 10. Not a whole lot of depth, though, to that one. And it kind of goes hand in hand what we talked about. Didn't have to do much against Wisconsin, but I do wonder with that knee injury, if he's a little bit more hesitant right now to go through his progressions, to go and take a look at some of those deeper shots or even give them time to develop down the field, because we're back to where we've been plenty of times, Todd. A lot of big questions about this passing game, and if it can not even be dynamic, can it at least be okay? And we just haven't seen that.
No, we haven't. And I think you make a good point with the injury, and he's not going to be 100%. And maybe that also has factored into the performance so far, but at least he is still able to move around and run and use his legs. And Iowa's been able to capitalize on that, and just gives you another reminder of how valuable it is to have a quarterback that has a little bit of a multi-dimensional approach. And it's been so long since Iowa has had a guy that you wonder about using his legs and running. That really is where his value is coming from this year. And they're doing a really good job of running the ball. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that defenses are having to focus a little bit on Gronowski as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, opening things up. I think we're going to see Kamari Moulton here pretty soon. 99 yards. He was, in fact, over it at one point, then lost 5 yards in one of those late plays before Gronowski salted it away with just a beautiful play. So setting up the final touchdown, of course, that was absolutely incredible. But the final play outside of the kneel down, telling everybody, I mean, it harkened back to Chuck Long, right? I mean, you just, the memories come flooding back right away on the naked bootleg there. Lester talking about it with Gronowski. The only person they told was Kamari Moulton, so he didn't try to grab the football on that play, but nobody knew. The offensive linemen were blocking like it was going to be a run play up the middle. Everybody in the stadium thought it was a run play up the middle. Everybody's hollering until all of a sudden you see him sneak out the back door and get the first down. But the thing that always stood out about that play is I watched it, and I've seen it a bunch of times now, is just the precision on that fake. That is Gronowski absolutely selling. That is Moulton selling it. And you look at just the usage of his hands and the way that he faked it, and he put it back on his hips so you can't see it, even if you're a safety or a linebacker for that moment. It's just those little things. And those little things, those are what add up for Iowa football.
Yeah, it's been Kirk Ferentz's MO forever. And it's not to say that Iowa's the only program that does the little things the right way, but the difference between having a good season and a bad season at Iowa is those little things. And again, I think with Mark Gronowski and the amount of games that he played at South Dakota State before coming to Iowa City, you're seeing the benefit of bringing in a veteran guy that's been around the block before. And would Iowa be having the same amount of success with a younger quarterback? Probably not. Again, I think when you look back on the season, and it's hard to believe that we're 2/3 of the way through here, already done. But yeah. I think when you look back on this, we're going to look and view this as largely a byproduct of bringing Mark Gronowski in.
Well, Todd, it is a huge week. This is my favorite rivalry game every single year. I grew up in North Iowa, grew up in Osage. So because of that, obviously very close to the border, on the correct side of the border, of course, here on the south side of the border, but a lot of family in Minneapolis. I grew up going to this game up in the Metrodome. So one that is ultra important. Plus, you play for the best college football rivalry trophy out there with Floyd of Rosedale. We're going to talk about that, but not just the game. Kirk Ferentz versus PJ Fleck, two different guys and two guys that have styled their programs very similar, yet going about it different ways. We'll do that as we continue on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat the details. Mazda brings the same attention to every craft we model. You can feel the craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to great control. And with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Today's episode is also brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It's their most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or cross-training with your favorite instructors. This is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. I love the Peloton IQ system, offering real-time strength coaching, giving you and tracking your reps for you. It suggests the right weights and corrects your form, making every rep safer and smarter. And how about this for a game changer? The screen, now a swivel screen. You can go from running on Tread Plus to strength training without missing a beat. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com. That's onepeloton.com. Trent and Todd back with you once again on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Todd, I mentioned it. This is my favorite rivalry game. For people watching on YouTube, make sure you hit subscribe. You got Floyd of Rosedale fan. Love this trophy. When it's at the state fair, got to get a picture with me and the kids. I mean, it's the rivalry for me. Minnesota rivalry for you, though. Does it have that same kind of special place? Because I say this all the time. I think it depends on where you grew up is kind of what your favorite rivalry game is.
Yeah, I grew up in eastern Iowa and just about 20 minutes away from the Iowa-Illinois border over in the Quad Cities. So to me, Iowa-Illinois was always a big rivalry. But the Iowa-Minnesota is the rivalry. And I think you and I would both agree on that. You have the trophy. These guys have been playing forever. The programs are relatively similar. It's not too often that one of them has a completely different style than the other one. And there's just a pure, unbridled hatred between Iowa and Minnesota. Like I said, we were up in Minnesota last weekend watching the Penn State game, and we had our Iowa gear on. And the locals up there had some things to say about the game that was coming up this weekend. So this is an absolutely great college football rivalry. And the people that have never experienced it probably don't quite understand that. But at least most people know what Floyd of Rosedale is, and it is the greatest traveling trophy in college football. I think you and I would both agree on that.
Yeah, I think it's hard to come up with anything better than what we have. The story behind it, that's obviously a big part. And you mentioned, who hates Iowa chant, even when they're not playing Iowa. One of my buddy's favorite things to do, home or away, is he likes to find Gopher fans as we're going to the game and starts chanting to them, "Who hates Iowa? You hate Iowa," and really let them know. And so we have such a great time with this game. Like I said, it is my favorite, but I think that's even added a little bit more here over the last decade with Phil Fleck, a guy that annoys the crap out of me, and it's because of all the extras. I've always said, not always, I shouldn't say that, because in the beginning I thought it was just a bunch of pomp and circumstance and there wasn't anything behind it. This guy's also a real football coach. It's not just about the cliches. It is about really building a football team, and he's done a good job at that. And as much as it pains me to give him credit, I've said recently, last 7-8 years, the dude's done a good job. He really has. The extras, oars in the water, all those things, they're not for me. That's not for me. But his personality, Kirk's personality, couldn't be more different, you couple it with two football teams that are built very similar. We're going to play physical. We're going to play tough. We're going to run the football. So as much as they're different, their football programs are very much the same.
Well, to play devil's advocate here is oars in the water and row the boat. How much of a difference is that from break the rock or next man in?
Kirk didn't say it 1,000 times though a year.
I changed my opinion on PJ Fleck. A friend of mine that I went to college with at Iowa grew up with him, and he told me that he has always been that way going back to middle school. So I was like, okay, so it's not an act. That's just who he is. And I think when you are so over the top like that, you do have the burden of proof on you. And it's taken a while, but I do think he has proven that he can coach, and he's got things working for him at Minnesota. And the old adage, there's more than one way to skin a cat, I think applies here. And Iowa fans are going to think that the way Kirk does it is the best. And as long as Minnesota's winning, they're going to give PJ Fleck the benefit of the doubt up there. There was a time where I didn't think that he was going to be able to last long enough for Minnesota to really reap what he's been doing up there. But he's got that program in a pretty good spot here. And this is a big test for them. Coming to Iowa City is over a touchdown underdog, I think. And this is a pretty good Minnesota team that's coming to Iowa City.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're a different team when Darius Taylor, their running back's out there. We see that as he's been banged up this year. He hasn't played great in the two games. He got injured in one of them against Iowa, but I think that's more a product of the system because we've seen plenty of times Minnesota against good Iowa defenses, they've been able to run the ball too. So I think that's kind of concern number one. And I've been impressed by Drake Lindsey. I kind of hearken him back to, he's a Nate Stanley type of quarterback, that big, solid 6'4", 230-pound guy that is not going to beat you with his legs, but he can get yards with his legs when necessary. He's been impressive at different times this year. And then what they did last week, of course, against Nebraska, just physically manhandling them on both sides. That's what Minnesota is. And it's going to be a battle up front. You mentioned that. We'll get to our picks coming up, presented by FanDuel a little bit later on. But north of a touchdown, it was the first bet of the week that I made. It just grabbed the points with the Gophers. It seems like too many in a spot like this. Now, I guess the other thing is, though, Minnesota, they've been really good at home. They have not played well on the road.
Yeah, and I think, we've seen last weekend was another good example of what Kinnick Stadium can do when you go in there. Minnesota at home, a much different team, and they're going to come into a hostile environment, and we'll see what Phil Parker and the defense have dialed up there in the first half. This entire season to me has come down to the adjustments in the second half. As long as they can keep a game from getting away from them defensively in the first half, then they've done what they can for the most part in the second half. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Minnesota have some success early on, especially maybe in the first quarter. But the way that Iowa closed out that game last weekend against Penn State gives me a good deal of optimism going into this one.
Haydenisms always jump into my mind this week. Him showing up at the press conference in his overalls, and he's got the straw hay in his mouth and doing those kind of things. I don't think we're ever going to see anything like that from Kirk. In fact, we know we're never going to see anything like that from Kirk. But another part of the Haydenisms is scratch where it itches. And that has really been this Iowa defense this year. Phil Parker, as we seemingly talked about every single week, Todd, they're just doing it in such a different way. And when they go about that and doing it a different way, scratch where it itches because they know they're not getting the pressure that they need just with the front four. So we're going to dial up pressure. And on top of it, one other thing and one other thought on this, as we've seen Phil Parker's defense blitz, they haven't been very good at it a lot of times. We see those guys, and a lot of times some of their best pressure comes off the edge, with a cornerback, which is really a surprise, dialing up things like that. But the timing, the different things that we've seen, certainly from the safeties, they've tightened up these blitzes as well. You do wonder if they've just been dedicating more time to that, and that's why they've looked so much better in those blitz packages.
I think I said this with you a couple of weeks ago, that this was going to be a typical Iowa football team. Maybe when we were looking at coming off the Indiana loss, talking about, playing better football in November than they were in September. And I think that's another good case of it is if you would have told me that we'd see some of these things from the defense a month ago, maybe I would have been a little bit more skeptical. But as time goes on, they start to figure some things out. They start to grow into their new roles. And again, this team seems to be the epitome of a Kirk Ferentz football team where they may not be perfect. They're not 4 and 5 star guys, But as the season goes on, they learn from their mistakes and they get better. And to me, that's life, right? If you make a mistake, you learn from it and get better. And they're playing much better defensively now than they were a month ago.
We get through this game. Iowa finds a way to get a win regardless. It doesn't matter if it's a 13-12 or if it's 27-0. Find a way to get the victory. Bye week after that, and then Oregon coming to town. It's going to change the conversation quickly, but you just have to do it. And it doesn't matter the fashion, just have to get away. And we'll wait till next week. Let's get a win on this one. We'll start having some of that crazy talk. And we know the crazy talk that is out there for this team and what is still in front of them, but it has to start this week. Speaking of this week, we're going to make our picks for this week. Presented by FanDuel, a look at the lines this week. Iowa, a 9-point favorite against the Gophers. We'll talk about that. Others in the Big Ten and our bet of the week. We'll all do that as we continue on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. College football is here, and well, we couldn't be more excited. From the tailgates, the rivalries, we got a big one this week. The energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel more like a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, you got hidden fees in there, price jumping at checkout, so much frustration. That's why I use Game Time. It's the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. Open up the app right now. You can see some great deals coming up this week for the matchup at Kinnick Stadium against the Gophers. Maybe you're looking for the next home game in a couple of weeks when Oregon comes to town. Another opportunity against a top 10 team. The app makes it super simple. I can see the exact view from my seat before buying. One of the many things that I love about the Game Time app. Plus, how about this? You actually pay what you see. No more of those surprise fees at checkout. Game Time has you covered. It's cheaper, faster, and less stressful than any other way that I bought tickets for any game, concert, or more. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. He's Todd Brommelkamp. I'm Trent Condon. Thanks for being with us as always. Make sure you hit subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're on the podcast side, 5-star reviews help us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. So wrapping things up here, Todd. This week, I told you already, my pick in the Iowa-Minnesota game. I grabbed the points right away. I took a look at it at the total. You know, I'm not a big total player. I don't know if you play many totals. I feel like every time I do it, I feel like I have a huge advantage and that I'm dead wrong, and that's probably why I stay away from it. But took a peek at that one. Like I said, I think this is going to be low scoring. Maybe that's worth a dabble a little bit. What are you seeing betting-wise this week with the Hawks and the Gophers?
Yeah, the line to me on this one doesn't make a whole lot of sense because it is a rivalry game, and to see Iowa favored by that much over Minnesota, especially the way that the Gophers have been playing lately, that one's a little stinky to me. I would stay away from that. It's almost like they're trying to tell you that Iowa is going to boat race Minnesota, and I just don't know if I can see that happen. And I did the quick math on this one, and I've got it right around 40 points. So I think maybe you sprinkle a little bit on the over here, but a 38.5, I think, is where I saw it, which is about where I think it should be here. This is just a fascinating game to me as far as what the point spread is versus maybe the perception. The one that I like this weekend in the Big Ten is I like Northwestern getting 7.5 in Lincoln against the Huskers. And Northwestern has kind of been a thorn in their side in the past. And you got Nebraska coming off last Friday. We'll see there, but I'll roll the dice with Northwestern and a little over a touchdown.
I'm intrigued by UCLA going to Indiana. The Hoosiers kind of played with their food a little bit last week against Michigan State for a while. They're down 10-7 in that game before they turn it on, as only Indiana can do, as we've seen so many times here this last year and a half. But UCLA, the way that they played, I didn't think they were going to travel well a couple of weeks ago to UCLA on the heels of their win against Penn State. They did. So keeping an eye on that one in the Big Ten. I want to take a look at some betting splits and a couple other things before I dive head first. But I think that's the one that I'm probably leaning closer to in the Big Ten. And the other one is Washington's an absolute play against Illinois. we just seen it. We saw Washington last week go to Michigan. Couldn't get it done. Even as that game was tight early on, Michigan pulls away. Going to go the other way. Illinois now making the trip back out there. They're in the top 25, and I'm going to lay it with the Huskies this week. But my bet of the week comes back to the state of Iowa. Speaking of absolute smash spots, this is a angle that historically pays in a big-time way. Unranked team at home as a favorite against an undefeated ranked team in BYU. Yeah, I'm taking Iowa State. I'm laying those 2.5. Mentioned I grabbed Minnesota right away. My second bet of the week, this rarely happens that both in-state teams are my first two bets of the week, was on the Cyclones minus 2.5. Wanted to get it before if it moves to 3. So I jumped aboard on that one. I'm going with the Clones here. Bounce back off a bye week to knock off a previously undefeated BYU.
Yeah, you stole my thunder there. I wrote down Washington as an unfavored team at home against the top 25 Illinois, and then I love Iowa State this weekend for a lot of the reasons that you laid out there. I think this is just a great spot for them to try to remind everybody that they're not dead yet, and we'll see. But yeah, I had that one circled from the get-go. Iowa State should win that game against BYU, and it's funny when you go back and look at the history of all of those times where we've seen unranked teams at home as a favorite against a ranked team. Iowa examples come to mind all the time. More often than not, the team that Vegas favors winds up winning. So I think it kind of plays into that, the public sees the number next to one team and, hey, I'm going to get points with them, and this is great. They know what they're doing out there in Las Vegas. So I think Iowa State's in a great spot this weekend. I agree with you.
I'm looking right now at the betting splits for the BYU-Iowa State game, and as I scroll through and actually find them here in front of me, because I think it is interesting. This is from Wager Talk right now. It is 89% of the money, yet only 50% of the tickets are on Iowa State. What that tells you is the big money, not Todd and I's, a couple dollar bets.
Yeah.
The people that are influencing lines, they are on the Cyclones this week and the early going. And when you look at it earlier in the week, I think that also tells you a whole lot more. Well, there is our betting picks presented by FanDuel for this week. Todd, next week it will be another bye week in the new iteration of college football. Now, we don't have 3 like the Cyclones do this year, which is another just crazy thing with their game over in Ireland. But a second bye week, that'll give us an opportunity to, of course, preview or recap what we see against Minnesota, maybe talk some of that big picture stuff if Iowa gets it done. And we'll get deeper into hoops as well next week. Todd Brommelkamp joining us here weekly on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Todd, appreciate it. We'll talk to you again next week.
Who hates Iowa?
Those guys hate Iowa.
Those guys hate Iowa.
Todd Brommelkamp, Trent, Condon. This is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. As always, thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Todd will talk to you next week. Until then, go Hawks.